ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with the book Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism by Dr. V. Bharadacharya. We're on page 265. Let's go to the text. And okay, so we were just talking in the at the end of the last section, we were just talking about the self being Shakti and the Jiva Kosha of Shakti. Kosha means a sheath. All right, is pure and independent. So this is some of we're talking about some of the subject matters of different Pancharatra Samhitas. Okay, so we're going to continue on. This is called Shristi. Shristi means creation. So its attachment to those objects is called Stiti. So Shristi means creation. Shristi means creation, and he explained here the contact. Its contact, that is the soul's contact with external objects, gives rise to cognitions about them. So how we know about external objects is we are connected with them in some way through the senses. So that is called Shristi in this particular discussion or Samhita. The attachment to those objects is called Stiti. Stiti means maintenance or just maintenance. Again, laya or pralaya means destruction, or samhara means destruction. So we may come to that. So attachment to a particular object is discarded by the self when it takes to another. And this is called samhara. So samhara is another name for laya or pralaya. It means destruction. So here we have the three words Shristi, Stiti, and Samhara, or we could say Shristi, Stiti, and Pralaya or Laya, right? And these are three concepts given in this particular Pancharatra Agama, right? And they're given with reference to how the soul relates to external objects. First of all, comes in contact with them and comes in knowledge of them by coming in contact with them, then becomes attached to them, then becomes detached from a particular object when it becomes attached to another object. So tiro bhava, right, which some people use as the disappearance, or the sometimes we hear this tiro bhava used as the death day of a particular person. Tiro bhava means disappearance, is the formation of impressions created by that object, right? That sensory object. And anugraha is the removal of that impression. So anugraha normally means grace, like that. So these are the five conjunctions, or five functions of the self. So here we have the five functions of self. What are they again? Shristi, Stiti, Samhara, Tirobhava, and Anugraha, according to this particular delineation in this Samhita. These are the five functions of the self, which is a part of Shakti. Is the self or the soul, the jiva, jivatman, is a type of energy, and correspond to the five functions of Shakti with the same names. So these five functions of the self, which is a part of Shakti, and correspond to the five functions of Shakti with the same names. What are those names again? Shristi, Stiti, Samhara, Tirobhava, and Anugraha. So through the grace, Shaktipat is sometimes, there are different Shaktagamas and Shaivagamas, and sometimes even in Vaishnavas, Shaktipat means the transmission of Shakti or power from one person to another. Typically, the guru does something to impart, to give power to the student. It could be God, though, giving some power, right? Just like we have Avesh avatars, Shakti Avesh avatars. So Avesh means that an empowered personality, and the power which he's empowered with is called the Shakti. And there are different types of Shakti. When we talk about Shakti Avesh, we have, for instance, Shesha is supposed to be holding the universe up on his hoods, Ananta Shesha. So he is called the Dharana Avesh avatar. So he is given the power of Dharana, or carrying, to carry. Narada Rishi, or the Narada Muni is sometimes called, is given the power of the Shakti of Bhakti, or devotion. He's able to impart devotion to others. So you can call him the Bhakti Avesh or the Bhakti Shakti Avesh avatar, like that. He has that power of bhakti infused in, and it's able to transmit it to others, like that. So we're talking about here the grace or the Shakti part of Shakti. The self discards its limitations through the grace. We just talked about anugraha. Anugraha means grace, right? Of Shakti part of Shakti. The self discards its limitations. What are the limitations? The self has limitations mainly imposed upon it when it comes in contact with matter and is covered by illusion, which is also called ignorance or agyana, the non-knowledge. The self naturally has all knowledge. The self naturally has all bliss. The self naturally is all existent. But when it's in ignorance, it's covered by some illusion. Then it thinks that it's temporary. It thinks that it doesn't have any knowledge. Its knowledge is blocked somehow, and its bliss or its experience of happiness is also blocked in some way. Okay, so through the grace of Shakti, part of Shakti, the self discards its limitations, which it has, by being, yeah. It may have some limitations. Also, there are some limitations also in liberation of the self too. Like the individual selves, Jivatmans, cannot create universes. They cannot give liberation. They cannot, there are certain things that they cannot do also. But most of the limitations that exist in the Jivatman are because of being in this material world. The Jivatmans in the spiritual world have less limitations. They have very few limitations, only a few. So the self discards its limitations and becomes omniscient and omnipotent. Omnipotent in a sense, okay, omniscient means he knows everything. Omnipotent means all powerful. The soul in liberation is, we could say, is not exactly all powerful, because still the soul acts according to the will of God, right? This is called Satya Sankalpa, the true will. God's will is different from our will. We decide we want to do something. We have a will to do something. It doesn't always come true. But God, if he decides on a sankalpa, he has if his will is to do a certain thing, that always comes true. So that's why his will is called Satya Sankalpa, the true will or the true vow. The waking, dream, and deep sleep states, actually, there are actually considered 4 states usually, but here they're just talking about 3 states of consciousness. The first is waking, the waking state that we're experiencing right now. Then we have when we sleep, there's a dream state, right? Even scientists know this. They call it REM sleep or whatever it is. When we dream, there's also just regular sleeping, which is left out here. So there's waking, sleeping, dreaming, and then deep sleep, where there's even no dreaming, right? Like that. So these are all considered different. Sometimes we hear of the 4th state, deep sleep, to be considered the 4th. Here it's considered the 3rd state. Waking, dream, and deep sleep states really belong to matter. Well, they belong. I mean, the soul experiences these things, but only when he's in the material world. In liberation, we don't have these different states like that. There's no deep sleep. There's no dream. There's only just waking state. There's only just the completely knowledgeable, omniscient state. The transcendental state does not really belong to the self, because it consists of a pure non-material sattva. Okay, so here what he's saying is that the soul itself is always awake. That is a quality of the soul. That is a natural quality of the soul, to be ever awake or ever omniscient, right? So we can't say it belongs to the soul, because it is the soul, right? That all expansive consciousness is the soul, right? The soul is chit. The soul is knowledge. Chit means knowledge. So because it consists of non-material sattva. Okay, so what he's saying here is that you can't really say that the knowledge is separate from the soul, right? Anyway, so here the self is required to get freedom. The self is required to get freedom from bondage to pursue the path of karma, which would please Shakti, which grants enlightenment. Okay, so that's sort of interesting statement here. Shakti grants enlightenment. Okay, Shakti meaning the Shakti of Bhagwan, of the Supreme Lord. The power of the Supreme Lord is by which the Supreme Lord grants enlightenment or clears away the Maya, the ignorance or the Agyana, like that. So the self is required to get freedom from bondage, to pursue this path, to pursue the path of karma. So Krishna talks about karma yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. So here is talking about karma yoga, right? The knowledge of reality is then acquired. So after performing karmas and karma yoga, then the knowledge of reality is then acquired by following the path of jnana. So first karma, then jnana. Krishna also speaks about jnana yoga in the Gita. By pursuing the path of yoga, right, which is the next step, as the next step after karma and jnana, the self gets freed from all limitations and it becomes one with Lakshmi Narayana in a sense, okay? We're not talking about completely one, but one in purpose and one in the sense of being completely aligned and subservient to Sriman Lakshmi Narayana, right? So this yoga that they're talking about here is actually bhakti yoga. So all of these can be yogas: karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. Nyasa, otherwise known as property or sharanagati or complete surrender, is recommended as an alternative, an easier means to getting moksha. So here we see in the Pancharatra Agamas, it's not only mentioning these paths of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, paths of self-effort, but also the path of nyasa or property or sharanagati or surrender, which is an alternative to those other ones, right? And much easier for getting moksha. That's nice. So like the Ahirbunya Samhita, which we discussed, I think, before, this text, and what's the text that we were actually talking about? I think it was Sattvada. Are we talking about Sattvada here? Lakshmi Tantra. No, we're talking about Lakshmi Tantra, I think. Yeah. Yeah, maybe Lakshmi Tantra. Anyway, so like the Ahirbunya Samhita, this text also is free from references to deities or idols or an idol worship or icon worship in the temples. The theories of creation get a detailed treatment. Okay, so remember in Pancharatra, in all the Pancharatras, we have the dealing of jnana, yoga, kriya, and charya. So some of the Pancharatras don't deal with kriya and charya, which is what we usually study about the rituals of installing deities and opening temples and having festivals and all this. But they and maybe even they don't discuss about mystic yoga, although I think Lakshmi Tantra does describe about some form of mystic or kundalini yoga. But they talk about jnana. Jnana means the reality of the soul and God, and how to, what we call is tattvahita and purushartha, the reality and the means to liberation, and the goal, what is liberation. Okay, so the theories of creation are get a detailed treatment. Shakti's greatness is stressed in every part of the work because it's a Lakshmi Tantra. So the position of Shakti or Lakshmi, the Lord Shakti, is described all throughout that particular work. And now this Lakshmi Tantra isn't completely translated into English. If anybody wants that, just get in touch with me at the email address or the WhatsApp number at the end of the video, and we can give you a link. You can download both the Sanskrit and the English translation. Shakti's greatness is stressed in every part of the work. The descendants of Lakshmi and her emanations are covered in in three full chapters, 4, 8, and 9. Linguistic occultism is treated in several chapters. Sound is traced to its source, Brahman, through the stages of Nada, Bindu, and others. So anybody who's familiar with Spota theory in the Sad Darshanas, and there's these theory about sound and how sound is the spiritual aspects of sound and different parts of sound. So Nada means sound, Bindu is a type of part of sound, and these are all very technical. You have to go into Mantra Shastra to understand the distinction between Nada, Bindu, and these other parts of sound. It's not going to be described here in detail. So sound is traced to its source. What's the source of everything? The source of everything is Brahman, means Sriman Narayana, right? Through the stages of Nada, Bindu, so these are different stages. And we probably will see this in the Sankhya system of creation, which is basically followed also in Pancharatra. Now he talks about Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, otherwise known as the Chaturvyuha, very important concept of emanations of God, right? Because remember, the Pancharatra system has to do with 5 different forms of God: Para, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antaryama, and Archa. So the second one is Vyuha, and this Chaturvyuha is Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, right? Are deities of these stages, deities of the different stages of the emanation from Brahman of sound. Okay, so the sound units called matrikas. So if you study any of the Pratishakyas, which deal with the pronunciation of Vedic texts, or even just some Panini Pratishakya, or one of the Pratishakyas for one of the Vedas or whatever, they talk about matra. Even the Taittiriya Upanishad, which starts out to teach about Vedic chanting, matra will be one of the. So you'll have varna, matra, sama, varna, matra, bala, sama, santana. There's these 5 or 6 different things which are spoken about in the Shiksham Vya Akya Syamaha Varna Swaraha, Varna, Swara, Matra, Bala, Sama, and Santana, the 6 things. Okay. So matra is one of them. Matrika is a beat. It means a short syllable, like is or I. This is one matra, one beat, or one blink of the eye, one slap of the hand, like that. Of course, you can have a faster beat or a slow beat, but it's still a beat, right? So when we chant Sanskrit, we go according to beat. We go according to the number of the long and short syllables. Even a longer syllable can even be 3 beats. So we can have one matra. We can have 2 matras, or 3 matras or more. Like a matra is a prosodial instant, right? A beat. Are classified. The sound units called matrika are classified. Matrika also means a letter. So we can say the Sanskrit alphabet is made up of approximately 48 or 50 matrikas, right? Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on what you're reading, what Pradishakya you're talking about, or whether you're studying Mantra Shastra, which maybe there are some, without going into Sanskrit grammar, there might be some more letters which are not used in regular words in Sanskrit, but are used for bij or seed syllables, which are also very important in Pancharatra. So we have seed mantras and things like that. So matrika are classified, and matrikas are also considered goddesses, and sometimes the matrikas, we talk about 8 matrikas or the 8 mothers, are shown to be presided over by the Vyuha deities. Okay, so these Vyuhas, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, preside over the different matrikas, which are and they also have to do with the evolution of sound. And so they have to do everything with mantra shastra. The structure of the mantra is analyzed and explained as constituted of bija, pinda, sangya, and pada. So bija we understand is a seed. Pinda is these are all technical words in mantra shastra. Sangya means definition, and pada means a word. So these all have different definitions, which we don't go into here because it's just detailed information, but basically getting the idea that it's a science. Sonic creation through the 6 stages called Advan, and the classification of mantras into high, middle, and low are dealt with in chapter 22 of Lakshmi Tantra. We can read about it. In a way, this chapter describes the mantra form of Lakshmi. Right, the mantra form of Lakshmi: Tarika, Tarika, Anutarika, Jagadyoni, Pradyumna, Saraswata, and Mahalakshmi, right, are the 7 bija mantras, right? So seed mantras, which are offered an exposition in chapters 24, 25, and 26. Shakti, with its, I don't know what this is saying. It's saying agnisoms. Agnis Oms, I don't know what that means exactly, Surya and Sudarshana aspects is set forth in describing Kriya Shakti in chapters 29 and 30. This text, we have to read those chapters to find out what that's about. This text, which is devoted to the glorification of Lakshmi, attaches great importance to Tarika, which therefore gets elaborate treatment under gross, subtle, the highest, and other standpoints. Tarika should be acquired through initiation, and this is treated along the with the way of worshiping. It is chapters worshipping it in chapters 42, 43, and 44. The way of successfully worshipping the mantras of Lakshmi and the manifestations Kirti and Jaya, right? So these are other expansions of Lakshmi, right? Are treated in chapters 46, 47, 48. Each hymn in the Sri Shukta, meaning each verse of the Sri Shukta, gets elaborate exposition in chapter 50. So there are usually 15 verses or mantras in the Sri Sukta, which is from the Kila section or appendix of the Rig Veda. It is perhaps this exposition which is mentioned in the Aryabhutya Samhita. I don't know whether we talked about that before, but he's referring back to that. What seems to be intended there is that the exposition of the Sri Shukta is to be given as of the Purusha Shukta. So in the Purusha Shukta is explained, and Sri Shukta is also explained. So obviously this Lakshmi Tantra, you would expect them to give an exposition of Sri Shukta because it's about Lakshmi. There is no Samhita or any text which is available where the Sri Shukta gets an exposition. So meaning no other text, because obviously he's doing it here in Lakshmi Tantra. So in the absence of information to the contrary, it is the exposition in the Lakshmi Tantra that should have been meant. In that case, priority of this text to the Aryabhutya Samhita will have to be admitted, right? So in other words, in order to understand about Lakshmi, we really need to read Lakshmi Tantra. So indications are there because many topics are dealt with in different samhitas, but only the Sri Sukta is only dealt with in this Lakshmi Tantra. So it's an important samhita. Some indications are there to suggest Kashmir as the home of this Tantra also, because we talked about many Tantras coming from Kashmir. One is the recommendation that birch bark, right, is used for inscribing the mantra of Lakshmi. So they used to use birch bark, or Burja Patra, I think it's called, right, to use as handmade paper to write mantras on. So this only occurs, the birch only comes from the Himalayan area, so Kashmir. So Nyasa, the doctrine of self-surrender, is treated as in Aryabhutya Samhita. These two are the only two ancient texts which deal with this doctrine. Grant of divine grace is referred to as Shaktipat in both. So the Aryabhutya Samhita and both the Lakshmi Tantra, these are both important arguments to study. This expression occurs also in the Shaiva Agamas of Kashmir. So today we normally associate Shaiva and Shakta Agamas as coming from Kashmir, but in fact Vaishnava Agamas also came from Kashmir. Interesting side note is that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have this Krama Deepika, which was written by Keshava Kashmiri, a Pandit called Keshava from Kashmir, and he also explains Agamas in a way that, so there is this type of tantric tradition in Kashmir, so Pancharatric tradition in Kashmir. So it must be admitted that Vaishnavism flourished in Kashmir along with Shaivism. The Agamas of both these could have had a common source and also influenced each other. In these circumstances, both these texts could have had their origin in Kashmir. So what he's saying, both the Aryabhutya Samhita and the Lakshmi Tantra. The Polshkara Samhita, which we talked about before also a little bit, which deals with a lot of mandalas and is available also in English translation online. If you send me, I'll send you a link, you can download it. And the Polshkara Samhita is a very old one. so it's also very important, right? 2 refers to some geographical surroundings through mentioning rivers, which can have risen in Kashmir. So it could also have been arisen in Kashmir. Likewise, the Jayakya, another very old one of the 3 main Ratnatraya, the 3 gems of Pancharatra, which is one of the main texts in the Kanchipuram, Vairaj Perumal, and which the Padma Samhita, which we all study, is the commentary on Jayakya. So which refers to many cruel practices which have also taken its rise in Kashmir. So sometimes we find in the mountain areas there might be some animal sacrifices and some different things like that. For example, if you go even to Nepal today, Nepal is basically the animal sacrifice capital of the world. They do the most animal sacrifices there. So up in the mountains, maybe there's not so much food to eat. If you go to Tibet, for example, the Tibetan Buddhists are not vegetarians. So so sometimes we find these cruel practices are there in some of the scriptures that have come from the Himalayan regions. So it might not be wrong to assume that all these early Samhitas of Pancharatra could have had Kashmir as their home. The Lakshmi Tantra mentions the Satvara Samhita, again, one of the 3 important Ratnatrayas or gems of the Pancharatra, twice. So in the Lakshmi Tantra, the Satvara Samhita is mentioned, which means that the Lakshmi Tantra is obviously later than the Satvara Samhita. If the reference in the Arabudna Samhita of the 8th century to the exposition of Sri Sukta can be taken to be meant this text, meaning the Lakshmi Tantra, then this must be placed before that date. Right. So therefore, when we see that Lakshmi Tantra is mentions the Satvara Samhita. So the Satvara Samhita is before the Lakshmi Samhita Tantra, but the Aryabhudna Samhita mentions an exposition of Sri Sukta, which can only mean the Lakshmi Tantra because we don't find it anywhere else. So that also dates the Lakshmi Tantra as earlier. And we know that, he has an idea that Aryabhudna Samhita is 8th century, right? So Lakshmi Tantra must be before that. Right. This is just to get a sort of an idea of the dates of these, right? Is meant this text, then it will not. Then we must place that before that date. Right. Correct. So the Ishvara Samhita. Now moving on to the Ishvara Samhita, another very important Samhita, which is also available in English translation, right? Contains about 8,400 stanzas in 25 chapters. It is said to be based on the Satvara Samhita, right? So that then it should be later than the Satvara Samhita. Both of these are stated to be followed at Yadavadri, which is known also as Melkote in present Karnataka Pradesh. So in Karnataka, near Mysore, in the Mandya district of Mysore, between Bangalore and Mysore, Bengaluru and Mysuru, right, is this place called Melkote, right? It's also called Tirunarayanapuram, where Ramanuja escaped from the persecution of the Shaivite Chola king in Tanjore, and he escaped to there and stayed in exile for 12 years. So very nice temple. This temple of Yoga Narasimha up on top of the hill, and also down on the plateau is the Tirunarayana temple. So Yadavagiri, it's also called, right? And the deity of the goddess there, Tirunarayana is the main deity. Sampakumar or Sevapillai is the Utsav deity, and the goddess there is called Yadugiri Nayaki. Yeah. So in Narada is the narrator of the Satvada system in this work. Standilya, Opagayana, Maunjayana, Kaushika, and Bharadvaja, right, perform penance on the Totadri hill. Okay, Totadri hill. Usually Totadri is down in very southern South India near the tip, right, in Tirunelveli district. Okay, and there's a very famous Tengalai Mutt, Tengalai Sri Vaishnava Mutt called Totadri Mutt, or it could be Vanamalai Mutt at Totadri, right? So there's a hill called Totadri, They were taught the system by the Lord himself, who said to them, and there's this quotation here from Ishvara Samhita, and let's just stop here for a second. One moment. One moment. So they were taught the system, that is these different sages who were doing penance in Totadri by the Lord himself, who said to them, and here's it says, Esha ekayano veda upadishto maya dvijaha mokshayanaya vai pantaha etad anyo na vidyate. Okay, so the reference is made to the origin of this system in Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, the first of the ages, the golden age, and its frequent disappearance and recreation. The seven sages called Chitra Shikandins, right? So here are the names here, right? We have Sanat Sujata, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara. So these are the four Chatusanas, the four Kumaras. Right? Kapila, Sanatana, Brahma, Rudra, and Indra. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That seems like more than 7. So maybe the 7 sages are the Chitra Sikandins, and then these other sages as well, right? Are stated to have promulgated this system. What is the system? The system is the system of Pancharatra, which was taught by the Lord, as representing the Ekayana Veda, which is the Veda when it was all one, and before it was broken up into Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva, right? So Prahlad, Sugriva, Hanuman, Vibhishana, Sanaka, and others adopted the routine of Panchakala. Okay, so the routine of Panchakala is even today followed by Sri Vaishnavas, right? Panchakala means 5 times. Kala means time, Pancha means 5, and it means that there are 5 activities that we do every day. And this is particularly a Pancharatric system, right? And those 5 things are called Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Swadhyaya, and Yoga, right? So the first one is Abhigamana, where you get up and you take bath and you clean yourself and maybe clean the house or whatever it is. Then Upadana, you go and you collect items which you're going to worship the Lord with. Then Ija, you actually do the daily worship of the Lord, right? Puja, and then, or Archana. And then after that, you perform, you study the scriptures or teach or study the scriptures, or both. That is called Swadhyaya. And then yoga means that you meditate at night and then drift off to sleep, meditating on your head on the feet of the Lord like this as a pillow. So this is, and yoga also, I mean, of course, we talked about how yoga is described in Pancharatra. So these are the 5 aspects or 5 routine daily activities. So it said that Prahlad, Sugriva, Hanuman, Vibhishana, and Sanaka, they all followed, and others, they followed this routine of Panchakala. There's a very nice book called Panchakala Kriya Deepa, which means the light on the activities that we perform in those 5 times parts of the day. So it's a very, very nice book. Comes from a manuscript in the Saraswati Mahal Library in Tanjore. So it's been printed, and I have a very nice copy, and some aspects of these things can be explained if anybody is interested. The Pushkaro, let's say Pushkaro, the Pushkar, I mean, probably says means Paushkara. Paushkara is a Samhita, and the Parameshwara Samhitas are mentioned, right? So here we're talking about the Ishvara Samhita. In the Ishvara Samhita, the Paushkara and Parameshwara Samhitas, which are used in Sri Rangam, are mentioned. So they must have come before. The name of the book is Panchakala Kriya Deepa. So it deals with those 5 activities. It's a paradigm, or it's an example of what is later called an Anikam. An Anikam means a book of daily rituals that are done by Pancharatrans or by Sri Vaishnavas or by different groups. An Anikam, the word Anika means day. So what you do every day, some people might call it Nityanikam, right? There's a common book called Nityanikam, the daily routines of every Brahmin. So for Pancharatrans, this would be Panchakala Kriya Deepa, like that. There are other texts which describe Arnikam, things that we do every day. Sri Vaishnava texts like Gopal Deshika Arnikam, Hobalam Mat Arnikam, which is also called Vaishnava. I forget exactly the full name of it, but anyway, there are many Arnikams, different Arnikams, and even Ramanuja himself wrote Nitya, the Nitya Grantha, which is his idea for his followers how to, how to spend the day every day and what to do, how to get up in the morning and go to sleep at night, and in between what you do. So the Pancharatra system is said to offer an exposition of the ever manifest Nityodita stage of God. Vyuha and installations which may refer to those of the deities or icons in temples. The Pancharatra Agamas are not of human origin and must be treated as Upanishads of Brahman. Okay, so the Upanishads are not of human origin, the Vedas are not of human origin. So it says here that the Pancharatras also are not of human origin. So there are of course different classifications of Pancharatras. So some of them are attributed to God himself speaking the Pancharatra, others to servants of God, other eternal servants of God speaking the Pancharatra, different devatas speaking them, or even rishis like that. But here they're treated as very spiritual, as equal to the Upanishads. So while enjoining the worship of the Vyuha deities, right? And remember, there were different types of Vyuhas, like in the Vaikhanasa Agama, which is also a Vaishnava Agama. They're talking about Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Ananta. So we have those as distinct from Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, are mentioned as forming the Vyuhas. So in this particular Samhita, the Ishwar Samhita, which we're talking about here, right? He mentions that the Vyuhas there are called Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Ananta. So this is in a way after the manner of the Jayakya. So that's also perhaps mentioned in the Jayakya like that. But the order is that of the Vaikhanasa, which is what I just said, that in the Vaikhanasa, this is the order of the Vyuhas in the Vaikhanasa. Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, Ananta. Ananta is another name for Purusha in the Jayakya, while it denotes a different entity here, or the passage may be taken to mean that the Vyuha of Vasudeva and others, meaning Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, may be worshipped, or the four deities mentioned above may be installed, one in each direction, and worshipped. So there are four directions, cardinal directions, and you can install them in the different directions. I mean, very similar in a Pancharatric Yagashala, for example, in the east we have Vasudeva, in the south Sankarsana, in the west Pradyumna, and in the north we have Aniruddha. So we have those different fireplaces or kundas, homa kundas, and we invoke those deities in those directions, right? So here is saying about installing deities or icons in those directions. So that's just the usual idea. So in the latter case, in the Vaikhanasa, so what I say, or in the passage, may be taken to mean that the viewer of Vasudeva and others are worshipped, or the four deities mentioned that may be installed, one in each direction and worshipped. In the latter case, the Vaikhanasa method is followed here, except for putting Ananta in the place of Aniruddha, right? Okay. So cosmological and philosophical treatment of the doctrines do not find a place here, but the Tantrika mantras or Agamic mantras are enjoined for use. So these mantras are Astakshara mantra, Sadakshara mantra, and Dwarasakshara mantra are mentioned as important mantras. So these are called Vyapaka mantras. They deal with the all-pervasiveness of God. The Astakshara deals with the God being all-pervasive from outside and inside, both. So it's the most important. Then the Sadakshara deals with God as Vishnu, as indwelling, the indwelling Lord, and Dwarasakshara is he's all pervasive from outside, right? So meaning that the universe is like the body of God. So the Astakshara mantra, of course, Om Namo Narayanaya, the Sadakshara Om Namo Vishnave, and the Dwarasakshara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these are the three most important mantras in Pancharatra, like that. And Astakshara is of course the most important, but many Samhitas do give more importance to Dwarasakshara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and some Samhitas we'll talk about use all three of these mantras to worship different forms of the Lord, which are in the same temple. So, for instance, the main deity may be worshipped in Sri Rangam. The main deity is worshipped with Dwadasakshara. The Utsava deity maybe with Astakshara, and another type of deity that is bathed or something, maybe with Sadakshara, whatever it is. So this Samhita discusses many matters like icon worship in temples and installation of the icons and conducting festivals, right? So we're talking still about Ishvara Samhita. Sri Rangam, Yadavadri, right, meaning Melkote or Tirunarayanapuram, and Kanchi are stated to be the important places where the Pancharatra mode of worship is adopted. And that is true. There are 4 very important out of the 108 holy places spoken of by the Alwars called Divideshams, right? There are 4 which are very important, which we remember every day at the end of Sandhya Vandanam. So we say, Sri Rangamangala Nidim Karunanivasam, Sri Venkadadri Shigaralaya Kalamegam, Sri Hasti Shela Shigarojvala Parijatam, Sri Shamnamami Shirasha, Yerushela Deepam. So first and foremost, Sri Rangam, which is in the south, Sri Rangam, then Tirupati, which is in the north, but it's a Vaikanasa temple. So the reason they've only mentioned here Sri Rangam, Tirunarayanapuram or Yadavadri and Kanchi is because they are the only ones which follow the Pancharatric system. The Vaikanasic system is in Tirupati, right? But we still say it. So in the south, Sri Rangam, in the north of South India, of course, is Tirupati. In the Shri Rangamangalim Karunanivasam, Shri Venkadadri Shikarala Kalamegam, Shri Hasti Shela. Hasti Shela means Kanchipuram, right? Is in the east, and in the west we have Shri Shamnamami Shirasa Yadushaila Deepam. So Yadushaila Deepam, Yadavadri Tirunarayanapuram, Melkote, right? So these 3 places are the most important temples where Pancharatra is adopted. So there is a separate chapter describing the glory of Yadavadri or Tirunarayanapuram. Sampat Kumar, the Utsava Murti, is said to have brought Narayana to this hill. Sanat Kumar, excuse me. Sanat Kumar is a rishi. So he brought the deity of Narayana to this hill, or Yadavadri or Tirunarayanapuram, which therefore came to be known as Narayanadri, and worshipped him according to the Sattvada mode, meaning using Sattvada Samhita, and also I'm pretty sure that means according to Sattvada Samhita. He is known as Ramapriya, so that's another name for the Utsava Murti there. Ramapriya Seva Pillai in Tamil, and Sampat Kumar is his name, like that. So it is said that Balarama and Krishna brought Ramapriya to Yadavadri and celebrated the festivals after installing him there. Yamuna, or Yamunacharya, 916 to 1041 CE, cites passages from this work in his Agama Pramanya, which is his work on Pancharatra, but they are not available in the present text. Anyway, this text must have been composed long before 900 AD to have been quoted by Yamuna, when it must have been admitted as a standard work on the system. Okay, Ishvara Samhita. So now turning to another Samhita, the Parama Samhita has a little more than 1,000 stanzas in 31 chapters. What the Lord, named here as Parama, meaning the Supreme, expounded in answer to the questions raised by Brahma, is narrated by Markandeya Rishi to Devala Rishi. The installation of icons and the method of worshipping them receives treatment, but there is no reference to the construction of temples and aspects of worship there. So on the other hand, cosmology, yogic practices, and such other matters are treated briefly. So you can see that each Pancharatra Samhita has certain things that it mentions, and some more briefly than others, some it expounds on more. For instance, the Poshkara has a lot of mandalas and explanation of mandalas in it. You know, the Ishvara, the Lakshmi Tantra, which we talked about before, and Aribudnya have more philosophical understanding or cosmological discussions. The three methods are described for worshiping God. So again, we're talking about the Parama Samhita here. I don't believe it's translated into English. It may be, we don't know. So worship through mantras is said to be karma yajna. Japa of the mantras and stotras consists of vakya yajna. So worship through mantras. So worship of God through mantras is called karma yajna, according to the Parama. Japa of mantras, or repetition of chanting of mantras, and stotras or prayers, right, is considered to be vakya yajna. Yajna means sacrifice, vakya means sound, the vakya. And the mental worship, so we have the worship that we do with our hands, the actual worship of the deity, right? And then we have the mantra, the japas and the mantras and the stotras we chant, which is called vakya yajna. And then we have mano yajna, or the mental worship of God, which has gone through before the external worship of God, or while we're doing the external worship of God, the meditation that we go through. Nothing that is called mano yajna, or the mental manaha yajna, right? So nothing is said to be more beneficial than offering worship at the feet of Hari. Okay, and so he's given a quote here: Hari padarchana danyana kinchit paramam hitam. Okay, so that's from Parama Samhita 331b. Among the mantras, those of Varaha, Narasimha, Shri, and Sudarshana are declared to be the best. And he'll give the quote in the footnotes here. Chapters 23, 24, and 25 break off with lacunae. So they go off into some other descriptions and things like that. So the date of this work could be placed before 900 AD, as it was cited by Yamuna in the 10th century in his Agama Pramanya, which is what I just said before. Perhaps a still earlier date is suggested from the absence of reference to temples. Possibly. Now we come to the Sanat Kumara Samhita, containing 3,549 slokas in 37 chapters. This work is divided into 5 sections, each called ratras, or nights, right? Pancharatra, 5 nights, right? And the night also means different things. Night can mean knowledge, which destroys ignorance, because night is associated with darkness or ignorance. So here in Pancharatra, and it also could be the knowledge which is given over a particular night. The Lord might tell the knowledge of Pancharatra in 5 nights to different personalities. Here, those nights, or which are distinct parts of this Sanat Kumara Samhita, are known as Brahmaratra, Shivaratra, Indraratra, and Rishiratra. So, and Brihaspati Ratra. So the Lord may teach Brahma, Shiva, Indra, or the Rishis and Brihaspati on these different nights. The last section, Brihaspati Ratra, is not extant. So we have only those 4 out of 5. It mentions there are 5 Ratras, but there's only 4 extant. So we don't know. Maybe there's a manuscript out there which has the 5th one, but we don't know it right now about that. We only have 4 out of 5 of these sections. And the first 3 chapters of the Brahma Ratra are also missing, right? So the first 3 chapters of the whole book are missing, right? From the colophons. Colophon, of course, colophon means when a person writes a manuscript, he'll also write his name as the scribe, as the person who's copying out from an older manuscript, right? And the date that he copies it out from, and some other details, right? So from the colophons, so sort of like a big bibliography of the book, right? The name of the text is also known as the Mahasamhita. So as well as being called Paramasamhita, it's also called Mahasamhita, and it's also called Vaishnava Siddhanta. At the end of the last section, so these might be different names used in different manuscripts of the same text. So the text in the last section, the text is referred to as the Dasa Sahasrika. Dasa Sahasrika. So Sahasra means 1,000, Dasa means 10. So Dasa Sahasrika means that which has 10,000 verses, which means that it consisted of 10,000 stanzas. It is difficult to believe in this, even if the lost Brihaspati Ratra was longer than any of the other sections. The total number could not come up to so much. Or it must have been supposed that several stanzas were lost, even from some of the other chapters which were available in print, right? So sometimes we find that, for example, the Bhagavatam says that there are 16,000 verses, but there's not 16,000 verses. So there are various explanations for this. Maybe we've lost some part of it. Maybe it's just somehow or other they say that it has so much, but it doesn't. Okay, so there is another text of this name, again, Paramasamhita, whose chapter is called Akshiroga Nirmulanam, right? Akshiroga, Akshiroga Nirmulanam, okay, which forms also the 94th chapter of the what is that? Sunit something sunny tantra or some sun tantra. Anyway, of the text, Pancharatra Mahopanishad, okay, is alone available. That Pancharatra system deals with matters like the treatment of diseases in evidence from a reference in the present Sanat Kumar Samhita and in the Kashyapa Samhita. It is held that by most scholars that there is another work with the name Maha Sanat Kumar Samhita, but there is no need to admit this, for some of the passages cited by these scholars as taken from this latter text are traceable to the printed Sanat Kumar Samhita. Okay, so this Parama Samhita is made up of different Sanat Kumar Samhita we're talking about here. Sorry, excuse me. So this Sanat Kumar Samhita, there are sections of it all over the place, and it's not the printed text that we have today is what he said before. Other passages could have been formed from the lost Brihaspati Ratra, which is supposedly the fifth part. Again, we've got this Shanti Tantra or Shanta Tantra, whatever it is. The printing's very bad here. Could have been included in this, but the name Tantra goes against this assumption unless it be the name of a topic in one of the chapters of this Ratra. Okay, so moving on. The Agama Pramanya, which is the book by Yamunacharya, and the works of Vedanta Deshika, meaning Vedanta Deshika's Agama Pramanya, Pancharatra Raksha, which we're studying at the moment with Dr. Tirunarayana. If you look on the YouTube channel, you'll find some lectures from that. Some passages cite some passages as taken from the Sanat Kumar Samhita on matters pertaining to daily practices, which we talked about before, anikam or pancha kala kriya, right? Prapati, right, meaning surrender or sharanagati, or which is also called nyasa, vidya, and others. While a few of these could be traced to the printed text, again of Sanat Kumar Samhita, the remaining are lost and should have formed part of some of the sections available. It is not possible to suggest that all these could have formed part of the lost Brihaspati Ratra. So, this text is not completely there, but whatever's there is important, and we can have a look at it at some time, but I don't think it's in English. Sanat Kumar Samhita is in the form of a discourse given by Sanat Kumara, who on what he learns from Brahma, Shiva, Indra, sages, and Brihaspati. Oh, I see. Respectively in the sections called after the names of these persons. So here we have Sanat Kumar is actually learning from these great personalities. The names of the sages are not given. That is in the fourth section, the Rishi Ratra. In the versions of the Pancharatra tradition contained in the Narayaniya section of the Mahabharata, so in Mahabharata is a very long epic, and it has a section called the Narayaniya section. So in the versions of the Pancharatra tradition mentioned in there, and recorded also in the Ishvara Samhita, these persons were said to be the promulgators or the teachers of these doctrines, of the Pancharatra doctrines. Sada Shiva, right, is the supreme deity. Now, Sada Shiva doesn't necessarily mean, excuse me, what is it saying? Sada Vishnu. Sada Vishnu. Sada means always, so it means eternal Vishnu. Is the supreme deity who is partless, right? So is partless. He cannot be divided up into parts, and is also called Narayana. And he's mentioned as being formless. So formless, it may be that the word used here in the Sanskrit is nirguna, without any qualities, but nirguna is understood. The word nirguna is understood by Sri Vaishnavas to mean not that he is formless or has no qualities, but that he has no material qualities. So we have to take this translation here of formless with a grain of salt and understand that it could mean nirguna, which means no material qualities. At the same time, it could be that God has a form and also has a formless form or a formless aspect, let's say. Right, so here we have from the Rishi Ratra 393, we have that mention of that. thing. So tata paratara devam sada vishnum samashrayet sa eva nishkalo deva sa cha narayana prabhu. Okay. He is called Vishnu when ritualistic worship is not offered, and when it is offered, he is called Mahavishnu. So either Vishnu or Mahavishnu. Both. So this is a description of Sadashiva. So what does it say here? Does it say Mahavishnu here? So it says only Sadavishnu here. Okay. So Vishnu or Mahavishnu, both are to be worshipped. This kind of classification of the deity in the Pancharatra tradition is known also in the Vaikhanasa system, right? So this aspect of the deity is made clear through the treatment of Vyuha. Again, the Vyuha system, these four emanations, whether they be Satya, Purusha, Ananta, and Purusha, or whether they be Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. The supreme deity in the unmanifest stage is known as called Sadavishnu. So here's another different sort of Vyuha system here, called Sadavishnu, who is also known as Vasudeva. Okay, he's identified with Vasudeva, the Sadavishnu, from whom arises a Vasudeva, another Vasudeva, right, with a definite form. So we talk about this Sadavishnu, or which above is said to be formless, and he is also considered to be like a Paravasudeva or a type of Vasudeva, formless Vasudeva, from whom another Vasudeva with definite form occurs or comes, and called Mahavishnu, and who becomes the creator and protector of all. He is created from his mind. He created from his mind that Vyuha Vasudeva, right, a goddess Shanti, from whom was produced the destroyer Sankarshana, also known as Shankara. Pradyumna, also called Brahma, arose from the left side of Sankarshana. From Pradyumna arose Saraswati, out of whom emerged Aniruddha, also called Purushottama. Rati issued out of Aniruddha, who created the waters where he reposed. So he was lying down in the waters. From his navel there arose a lotus. From the egg which appeared from that lotus, there came out Hiranyagarbha, identical with the four-faced Brahma. A goddess called Sandhya, right, arose from Brahma. Rudra, also called Satya, came out of Sandhya. So there's multiple names here, and to understand each one of these personalities and how they emanated from the Lord, and whether they are Jivatmans or whether they're emanations of Paramatma, or the para and viewer forms of God, we have to go deeply into this Samhita. And he's just mentioning it in passing. He hasn't explained in detail each one of these. So Rudra, also called Satya, came out of Sandhya. Marichi, Daksha, and other progenitors also came out from her. Achyuta, identical with Pradyumna, emerged from Satya. Aniruddha sprang out of Achyuta. Thus, there are two sets of viewers, one subtle and one gross. Those deities belong to the gross kind, attended to the work of creation. This treatment differs from that given in the Lakshmi Tantra. So not all the systems explain it in the same way. The account of the divine descents is also peculiar and does not have much in common with that of the Puranas. So you'll see Puranic stories, and it's a little different in the Pancharatra. The gods who were harassed by Hiranyakashipu approached Aniruddha lying in the ocean on a serpent couch. So somehow this Vyuha form, which is lying in the water on a serpent couch. Vishnu is not stated to have made his appearance from a pillar, right? This is normally we say that Narasimha appeared from a pillar, though his slaying of the demon is mentioned, right? So it describes the Puranic story of Narasimha, but it doesn't describe that he came out of a pillar. It does describe that he killed Hiranyakashipu. So that the gods desired to avoid old age, and so approached Sankarshana, who took the form of a tortoise and gave them nectar, right? Whereas in the Puranas, we find the story of the turtle Kurma with the Mandara mountain on top, churning the ocean of milk and making the Amrita. Here it's slightly different. At the command of Vishnu, Vishwaksena became Garuda, the vehicle of the Lord. That's interesting, right? Hayagriva, the mind-born son of Pradyumna, restored the Vedas to the gods who had lost them, right? So this is not to be confused with the Hayagriva, who was the demon who, or the Madhu and Kaitaba demons, they stole away the Vedas, and then Hayagriva came and killed those demons and gave the Vedas back to Brahma and the gods. So when they had lost all knowledge, they were taught the Sankhya doctrines by Kapila, who was created by Sankarshana. Sankarshana came down as the son of Jamadagni, right? So we need to make a chart of this so we can see exactly what happened, right? Krishna taught the Pancharatra system. This version of divine descents shows how the viewer deities contributed to the maintenance of Dharma. So from the viewers came different Vibhava incarnations like Krishna, etc. As in the Aribudna Samhita and the Lakshmi Tantra, here too, there is no mention of the form of God as Antaryamin, or the Paramatma or Supersoul. But the Sadgunya, meaning God having 6 qualities, right? Jnana, Shakti, Aishwarya, Virya, Tejas, like that, right? Is not dealt with here, and thereby it differs from the other 2 ancient Samhitas mentioned, right? So in the other 2, the Aribudna and the Lakshmi Tantra, these Sadgunyas, these 6 qualities of God are explained, whereas in this one they're not. So curiously, and this again, we're talking about Ishvara Samhita, right? Yeah, I think after some Kumar we talked about Ishvara Samhita. So curiously enough, this text refers to 4 kinds of linga. Linga simply means a form, but we're used to the lingam being sort of a phallic symbol. Brahma, Sankarshana, Vaishnava, and Tridaiva, right? So they would be Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right? Having lingas. And if you go to Bali today, you can see there's a place called Goa Gadja near Ubud in upcountry Bali, and they have a cave there where you can go in, and they have 3 lingams. It's a Brahma lingam, a Shiva lingam, and a Vishnu lingam. So normally today we talk about Shiva lingams only, like that. But there can be Vishnu lingams, there can be Brahma lingams, like that, and there can also be a Tridaiva, or a lingam which includes Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva all together, like that. So installation of these is mentioned, and it is not clear whether the lingam of the Vaishnava kind was prescribed at a time before idol worship came to be adopted. So it's very common that people talk about the lingam as being a prototype for the later icons that come in the temple, and that it was a stage. Lingam worship was a stage older than icon worship, but clearly younger than the sacrificial worship or the worship of 2-dimensional yantras and mandalas or deities. Yeah, so these are all ideas of historians. The mantras are classified as, the mantras in this text, right, again, Ishvara Samhita, as Somya, Agneya, and Somyagneya, right? So Somya, Agneya, right, and Somagneya, so a mixture, right? And also of Vaidika Tantrika and Vaidika Tantrika mixture, right? So we know from the Bhagavatam 11th chapter, 11th canto, 27th chapter, Krishna says, you can worship me according to Vaidika rules, Vedic rules, Tantric rules, or a mixture of both. So here we have mantras being classified as Vedic Tantric or Vedic Tantrika, and Somya Agneya and Somagneya, right? So the Tantrika mantras have an important role in the Pancharatric system. Among the mantras, the Astakshara, Dvadasaksha, and Vishnu Gayatri are important. So in this Samhita, Ishvara, Astakshara Om Namo Narayanaya, Dvadasaksha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and Vishnu Gayatri Om Narayanaya Vidmahe Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tanno Vishnu Prachodayat are important mantras. A liberal outlook is evinced in prescribing the mantras for other deities such as Devi, Shanmukha. Shanmukha means Kartikeya or Skanda, Murugan in Tamil, one of the other sons apart from Ganesha of Shiva and Parvati. Agni, the god of fire. Yama, god of rules or death. Rudra, and others. So there are also mantras for all those deities in Ishvara Samhita. So interesting, a footnote here says the followers of Pancharatra are known by different names, like Sattvata, Bhagavata, Vaishnava, and Pancharatrika. So these are all synonyms for Vaishnavas. All these are said to have undergone the initiation, meaning the Panchasamskara, to enter, which is the Pancharatric initiation. So karma, jnana, and yoga, which could mean here bhakti yoga, right? So these different paths are enjoined as the paths to be taken, which was described in some of the other samhitas, taken up, and also in Bhagavad Gita, right? One after another in this order to obtain salvation. So first karma, then jnana, then yoga or bhakti yoga. And worship of the icons is recommended while pursuing the first two ways, karma and jnana. While practicing yoga, the aspirant will have spiritual experiences in dreams, in his own body, in the inner effulgent self, in his mind and sense organs. He realizes close union or sayujya with Vishnu while practicing yoga. Now, it's a misunderstanding that the word sayujya means merging into the Supreme Lord. It doesn't mean merging. It means very close, intimate association. Okay, sayujya. Because how do we know this? Because in the Atavashira Upanishad, it mentions Om Namo Narayana iti mantropasikaha Vaikuntha Bhuvana Lokam Gamishyati, that the person who worships with the Om Namo Narayana mantra will go to Vaikuntha Loka. When you go to Vaikuntha Loka, you don't merge into the existence of the Lord, but you are servant of the Lord in very close contact with the Lord. This is also sometimes called samipya, or being very close, the liberation of being very close. So sayujya, samipya, like that. Right. So it also says at the end of that Upanishad, right, it recommends chanting Om Namo Narayana. And at the end it says, Narayana Sayujam Avapnoti, Sriman Narayana Sayujam Avapnoti, that the person who does this will get Sayujya Mukti, which is considered the highest form of Mukti. It is very close association or with Sriman Narayana, but of course in a serving way. Right. So some people wrongly equate sayujya with kaivalya, or the merging of the, kaivalya means isolation. Isolation means completely completely being alone. Kaivalya means being isolated and just enjoying the bliss of the soul. So to adopt any of these paths, it's necessary to worship God. By worshiping Mahavishnu through yoga, one becomes fit to adopt karma yoga. Sadavishnu becomes pleased with this karma, and makes the aspirant fit to adopt jnana yoga. Thereupon, yogic practice brings about the final release of the aspirant, probably meaning bhakti yoga. The proper place, time, and kind of penance one is required to undertake is also prescribed. Those who worship Vishnu with the three mantras, which were mentioned above, the Astakshara, Dvadasakshara, and Vishnu Gayatri, after death, get a form like that of Vishnu, which means Swarupya Mukti, right? And are also called Vishnu, right? Such persons are given various regions to occupy where they get different names, which are enumerated in the Indraratra, chapter 6 of this text. Some of these are identical with those found in the Vishnu Sahasranama, which is 1,000 names of Vishnu coming from Mahabharata. The regions which they occupied are described in the next chapter. Curiously, so it means chapter 7 of the Indraratra of Ishvara Samhita. And I guess we can read that, right? So the regions which they occupy are described in the next chapter, right? So that means chapter 7, right? So curiously enough, there is no reference here to Vaikuntha, Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Aniruddha, which were discussed in the Vaikanasa section, or also in, I think it was Sanat Kumara Samhita. Anyway, whatever it is, right? Maybe it was Satvata Samhita that mentioned that. They are mentioned as worshipping Sadavishnu, right? So letters which make up mantras are enumerated together with their presiding deities. So that's very interesting. So each letter of the alphabet has a presiding deity. The basic letters and their evolutes, which have evolved out of them, are treated in such a way as to throw light on the linguistic aspect of mantras. So we can understand about a mantra by looking at each and every letter of the mantra. Perhaps a study of them in the light of modern linguistics might unravel some mysteries about the nature of sounds and letters. So something like in Sanskrit, there's a list of root words called Dhatupat by Panini, and if you go and you take the different letters from a word and you look up the meaning of the different roots that come from it, for example, Diksha Di means diete, means something is given. Ksha means to something is destroyed, right? And together it forms the word diksha or japa. Janmanishad papanasana iti japaha. So that which destroys rebirth, right, and sins is called japa, right? So we understand the meaning of words and mantras from the syllables. And from, so here it's going to be describing different things about different syllables and things, different letters. The Sanakumar Samhita uses Tamil expressions like Allavatam and Karandika, which mean fan and ladle respectively, indicating that these were added while the text was revised for use in Tamil Nadu. So offering of flesh to the deities is referred to, suggesting that at least the portions where such references are found were composed either before the full development of Jainism and Buddhism or at a place where their influence was not felt, right? So archaic expressions are also used quite frequently. So very ancient expressions. Mention is often made of the opinions on certain matters which could not be traced to any known source, but which point to the work presupposing some ancient Pancharatra texts. This Samhita refers to Padmodbhava, a work available only in fragments. Padmodbhava Purana, Mahindra Samhita, Naradarchika, Archanika, Garuda Archanika, and other Archanikas having to do with Archana or the worship of the Lord, right? And also Shata Sahasrika. Shata Sahasrika would be 100,000 verses, right? Since this text is treated as one of the 5 best works or ratnas, right, and is supposed to be the foremost amongst the Samhitas, it is possible to have an idea of its importance among the Pancharatric works. That is, that it is stated to be the foremost, Adya. Adya also means foremost, means the original. In the Kapinjala, right, which is another Samhita, does not point out to its priority over others in point of time, but only to its importance. Right. So we shouldn't take this word Adya to mean that it was the first chronologically, but it's most important. The unique concept of the supreme reality, the development of the Vyuha theory, the role assigned to the mantras, the practical side of Tantra, which includes the use of mudras, hand gestures, mandala, right, like a yantra or two-dimensional design, and nyasa, meaning touching different parts of the body and placing syllables on them, like that, and the treatment of the routine life of the followers, which we talked about before, called anika or panchakala kriya, of the Pancharatrika tradition in the Brahmaratra, which is a section of it, give an individual stamp to this text, a feature not to be noticed in any other Samhita. The lost portions of the Brahmaratra and the whole of the Brihaspati-ratra, so the lost portions of the Brahmaratra, remember the first 3 chapters are not to be found, and then also the whole Brihaspati-ratra, which is not found, right, must have contained important details on the doctrines and practices of the Pancharatra system. These topics and the fact that temples and festivals are not mentioned should have been responsible for calling this word Adya, meaning it came prior because there were no temples or icons at that time. And that's probably why it talks about lingas and certain things like that. Anyway, not Adya, not ancient, but to be reckoned with as first in the enumeration of Samhitas. So once again, that is the Sanat Kumar Samhita, I guess. The Sanat Kumar Samhita, which we dealt with after the Ishvara. Yeah, let's not get it all mixed up here. Yeah, not quite sure there. I have to go over that again. Anyway, okay, so continuing on, right? Here we have, since the text is treated as one of the, we did this. Okay, so here we go up to the enumeration of Samhitas. Right. So it is worth noting in this context that this text is 12th in the order enumerated in the Padma Samhita. So in Padma Samhita, right, which is supposed to be a commentary on the Jayakya Samhita, which is used in Kanchipuram, right? There's a list of Samhitas, and it comes number 12. this Sanat Kumar Samhita, mention of the Padmodbhava and Mahendra, which are cited in the Sanat Kumar Samhita, need not be given serious consideration in regard to priority. Anyway, the reference made to this text in the Kapinjala Samhita stands unaffected. The Parameshwara Samhita, now we move on to the Parameshwara Samhita, which is used in Sri Rangam, right, in the Sri Rangam temple, has about 9,000 stanzas distributed in 26 chapters. It seems to have had two sections, Jnana and Kriya Kanda. So remember, Jnana Kanda is usually the first one. It deals with knowledge of reality, like that. And then the Kriya Kanda is activities. The first section is lost, except for one chapter. So the Jnana Kanda. Every aspect of the Sattvada system is said to have been treated here. This chapter, which is now available, so this we're talking about here is the Parameshwara Samhita. Every chapter which is now available contains an account of the development of the Pancharatra system through several stages, much in the same way as in the Narayaniya section of the Mahabharata. The promulgators of the doctrines are named as in the Ishvara Samhita. So Standilya is stated to have taught the doctrines to Sumanta, Jaimini, Brigu, Upagayana, and Monjayana. So there are some pranam mantras that we chant to as Pancharatrins to these different rishis, right? Nara and Narayana, right, who incarnated in Bhadrakashram to give us the Astakshara mantra, are stated to practice the Sattvada Dharma, right? So the Sattvada Dharma is meaning Pancharatra, the Dharma of Pancharatra in Bhadrakashram for the well-being of the world, right? This text is said to have had 100,000 stanzas, to have been condensed subsequently to 16,000 stanzas, both for the Jnana and Kriya Kandas. So present form is only 16,000 stanzas. So still, that's quite a lot, right? So this Samhita is followed in the temple at Sri Rangam, the glory of which is recounted. Vibhishana arranged for the worship of the Lord here, according to the Pancharatra tradition, because Vibhishana actually brought the deity, Lord Rama, at his Padabhishekam, gave this deity, which was worshipped in the family coming down from Brahma. This deity of Ranganatha in Sri Rangam came out of the ocean of milk along with the golden Vimana, which you can see behind me, which is called the Pranava Vimana, and they were handed down in the Vamsa, the Surya Vamsa of from Brahma down to Dasaratha and to Rama. And Lord Rama gave this deity to Vibhishana to take to Sri Lanka. On the way to Sri Lanka, it got stuck in the place on the island of Sri Rangam, which is in the middle of the Kaveri River, just south of the Trichinopali town. And it became the center of all Sri Vaishnavism, basically the Vatican of Sri Vaishnavism. Okay, so here it's mentioned in this Samhita, the Parameshwara Samhita, it's mentioned how Vibhishana arranged for the worship of the Lord according to Pancharatra tradition, although sometimes some people say that originally it was Vaikanasik, and that Ramanuja changed it to Pancharatra, but in any case, in the Samhita itself, it talks about this. So the construction of this temple is found to be in strict accordance with the rules given here. So there's some rules about how you have a Vishnu temple, and it has 7 concentric walls around it, and it's the only temple of its type in the whole of the world to follow this system, completely. So why this text should be described as ancient in the Pushkara Samhita, on which it is held to be based, is puzzling, right? So it's supposed to be based on Pushkara Samhita, but it says perhaps such references were interpolated at a later date. Many of the ancient and important Samhitas, such as Pushkara Sattvada Jayakya, which we talk about as being very ancient, right? And others are mentioned in the Parameshwara. So it means that it should have been later. Besides, there are passages here identical with those in the Pushkara. So obviously it's taken from the Pushkara, some of these passages. Ramanuja, 1017 to 1137 AD, is the earliest to cite passages from this text, which must be then given a date prior to 1000 AD. Right. So the Vishvaksena Samhita, continuing on, right? The Vishvaksena Samhita is another one, contains a little less than 4,000 stanzas in 39 chapters. Vishvaksena expounds the Pancharatra system to Narada. Chapter 8 has a fresh beginning with Narada's question put to Vishvaksena, indicating that this may be the first chapter for a section. The first 7 chapters, right? So the first 7 chapters before this, right, may taken therefore to form a different section. However, this, however, is not marked anywhere in the text. Besides, the chapters are in the form of a discourse addressed by Vishvaksena to Indra, and some of them break off. Chapter 27 is in both prose and verse. So normally all these things are in verse form, in sloka form, but there's some prose in there too. The entire work deals only with Kriya and Charya, the activities of building temples and installing deities, and then the worship of daily and in festival times, right? So that's Vishvaksena Samhita. That's also printed, but maybe not translated. So there must have been either another text with the title Vishvaksena Samhita or another section which dealt with jnana and yoga portions. That's his idea, right? This is evident from the citations made from this work by Pillai Lokacharya, Vedanta Deshika, and Manavala Mahamuni in their works, right? So apparently there are some other sections which we now don't have dealing with jnana and yoga, right? And not just Kriya and Charya. So because of these acharyas, Vedanta Deshika, Pillai Lokacharya, and Manavala Muni mentioning quotations from that. The last mentioned teacher, meaning Manavala Mahamuni, has made full use of this Samhita, the Vishvaksena Samhita, in his commentary on Tattvatraya, which is another book which we also gone over. You can have a look on the YouTube channel. There's a YouTube class on Tattvatraya by Pillai Lokacharya. This section is not now available. From the citations, it appears that this text contained God's discourse, or Sriman Narayana's discourse to Vishvaksena. So in the Sri Vaishnavism system, Vishvaksena, Sriman Narayana is the first acharya, then Periya Piriti, meaning Mahalakshmi, right, is the next one, and then Vishvaksena. So here we have, it's described that the Lord himself speaks to Vishvaksena and describes certain things in this Samhita, which is called Parameshwara Samhita. And an account of what this last portion contained may be briefly given. Thus, both Vishvaksena Samhita, both the highest place and the created world are subject to the control of Vishnu. Okay, so we can see this Vishnu and Shri, Vishnu and Lakshmi, both. So it says Asya Mama Cha Shesha Hi Vibhutir Ubatmika Iti Shruti Shiras Sidam. I think I'm not sure what that is, right? Macha Shastreshvapi Mananat or something, whatever. Those who are well versed in Vedanta declare that God's forms are 5: Paravyuha Viva Niyata, meaning Antaryamin, the Paramatma or Supersoul, and Archa, the deity or icon in the temple. The last mentioned is anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means that is shaped like a human figure, like that, and is full of compassion, right? Because why is the Archa Vigraha, always the deity in the temple, said to be full of compassion? Because he's the God that we can most closely relate to, easily relate to. Otherwise, the super soul and these other forms are very difficult to experience or to relate to. The view of deities together constitute a group, and Vasudeva is said to be supreme. The devotees are to worship him according to their varying abilities. These 4 forms emanate from the ever-manifest form. Another group of 5 on this basis is made up of Paravasudeva, who is ever manifest, Nitya Udita, and the 4 Vyuha deities periodically manifest, Shantodita or Shanta Udita. Another grounding is according to the 4 stages: waking, dream, deep sleep, and transcendental consciousness. Here we have those four things. Previously in some other Samhita we were talking about 3 states of consciousness, but here are the 4, right? So waking, dream, deep sleep, and transcendental consciousness, presided over by Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, and Vasudeva, respectively. Sankarshana teaches the Vedas and the Pancharatra. Pradyumna introduces all the religious rites which are to be performed. Aniruddha reveals the nature of the self, the Lord with 4 arms in this last mentioned group, 2 in the second, right? And Paravasudeva is dark in complexion with 4 arms, right? So we have the explanation there. The number of Vibhava avatars is said to be 30, as against 39 mentioned in the Arhibudnya Samhita, remember? And Upendra, Dadi Bhakta, and Hayagriva are also mentioned as divine descents. Their descents are of 2 kinds, primary and secondary. In the former, right, so when we say avatar, avatarti in Sanskrit means to descend. We don't say that God incarnates because he doesn't go into the flesh, into material flesh, right? So he's not incarnated, but he's descending. His form descends from the original forms, right? Or from manifesting, emanating from different forms, like the Vyuha forms. Their descents are of 2 kinds, primary and secondary. In the former, the primary, God comes down in person. In the latter, he enters into the body through his own nature or his power, whether it is to take the body of an animal or a plant, like a short mango tree in the Dandakaranya forest, or a secondary form like that of Brahma or Shiva. So the Lord comes and he enters into and gives power to his divine power, or part of his power, to a particular person. Again, we call this an Avesh avatar or Shakti Avesh avatar. So not the Supreme Lord directly. So these are primary and secondary avatars, like we see in the Bhagavatam, primary and secondary avatars, like that. It describes in the 1st canto, 3rd chapter of the Bhagavatam. Okay, so all of these are taken up by him at his sweet will and pleasure. All of these different avatars. The Antaryaman, or the Supersoul, the Paramatman form, is stated to be like a relation, ever present, whether the self is in heaven or hell. So it's always with the self, with the Jivatman. The Paramatman, or the Antaryaman, goes along with it everywhere, whether in heaven or in hell. So he gives a quotation here. Antaryami, Antaryamyasya rupancha sarvesham bandhu vat stitam sarva svarga naraka, so svarga naraka in heaven and hell, right? Praveshepi, right? Bandhuratma hi Keshava. So Keshava goes everywhere as unto Yamin, right? To hell or to heaven with the soul. The archer form is like a relation to all, right? So it is within the easy reach of the devotees. It is said that the 6 qualities, sadgunya, or 6 gunas, right? Which we described before, Jnana, Aishwarya, Shakti, Virya, Tejas, and Bala, right? Thereby meaning that are present in an unexcelled way in the mantra and the icon. Thereby meaning that the worship of the icon is as good as visualizing God through the mantras. So the mantras and the icon are inextricably linked. God is present alike in both the icon and the mantra. So that's also mentioned here. Sarvatishtaye sadgunyam samstitam mantra bimbayoho. So mantra means mantra, bimba means the icon, the deity. Mantra bimbayoho means in both the mantra and the bimba. Samstitam is situated. Sadgunya, the 6 qualities, the Lord of 6 qualities. Sarvatishaye, right? The Sarvatishaye is the supreme. The supreme who's lying down, like that. So he is the subject denoted in the mantra and remains in the icon out of compassion for the people. That's also mentioned. Mantre vachyat mana nityam bimbe, in the deity, right? 2 kripaya stitam, out of his mercy he is also situated in the deity, like that. So Mantre vachat mananityam. So also in the spoken and the mentally conceived mantra, like that, and also in the deity through his kripa, or his mercy. God himself states that in the 5 forms he is accessible more easily in every succeeding form. So these different forms, right? So para, vyuha, vibhava, antayama, and archa. So each one is more easy to accept, to be accessible, right? So the ultimately accessible one is the icon in the temple, the archa form. So more accessible easily in each successive form, thereby meaning that he is most easily accessible in the archa form. So that's also mentioned here, and there's a stotra for that. Evam pancha prakaro ham atmanam patamada, right? Purvasadapani purvas mat jayang chaivotara solabhyato means easy accessibility, jagat swami, the Lord of the universe, right? Uttamotara, he uttamotara is certainly the most of all, right? Like that. Okay, nice. So we can look at, if I want to get the Sanskrit right, we have to look it up. Yeah, but it's pretty clear what it means. One must take interest and care to worship God in the archa or the icon form as if he was powerless, dependent, and fit to be protected, right? So this is the attitude that the person worshiping the deity form in the temple should take, that he is powerless himself, he's completely dependent upon the Lord, and he is fit for the Lord to protect him. And this is part of the 6 things that a person will think of when he surrenders or does prapati or nyasa or sharanagati to the Supreme Lord. So that's also mentioned here in a verse. Chintayetsha jagannatham swaminam paramartyataha ashaktam asvatantram cha rakshyan chapi janardanam. Okay. Certain deities are forbidden to be worshipped. Arjuna, Vyasa, Parashurama, Kubera, and some others are included in this list. Well, that's very interesting, right? Right. So because some Vaishnavas, like especially Madhvas, they have deities of Vyasa and they worship deities of Vyasa. Arjuna, I don't know if I've seen that. Parashurama, there's certainly people who worship Parashurama, but maybe not so popular. Kubera is, of course, a devata, which is sometimes worshipped with Lakshmi, who sometimes worship, and others included in the list. So it'd be interesting to see this list of deities that are forbidden. Maybe it mentions why they're forbidden to worship these particular deities. Those who get released, right, meaning attain moksha, right, or liberation, reach the highest place, are atomic in size. The soul is atomic in size and radiates spiritual atoms of the size of the triad. Okay, so we don't exactly know what that means, but the soul is considered to be a certain size, but it's actually atomic in nature, and we can't see it or perceive it with our own vision or with material science. The Vishnu Samhita, coming to another Pancharatra, contains 3,000 stanzas in 30 chapters. A sage called Sumati instructs Upagayana, again one of these sages who is in the list of sages who promulgated Pancharatra or who learned Pancharatra on Pancharatric doctrines. So Sumati instructs Upagayana. It contains a brief and lucid account of the doctrines on the Charya and Kriya aspects, so Kriya and Charya, right? Aspects of the Agama, not Jnana and Yoga. It gives an interesting classification of the devotees of Vasudeva. The Padma Samhita, now we come to the Padma Samhita, which is the most commonly studied because it deals with worship. It has most of the topics of Pancharatra, and it also is used for the installation of new deities and opening of new temples, right? When no traditional Pancharatric text, which is used for a particular temple, is used. So now we come, Padma Samhita contains more than 9,000 stanzas. You can get all the stanzas are given on the internet. You can get actually all the stanzas, even in Roman transliteration, are available. You can download them, you can look at them, you can translate them if you like. So there's no English translation that I know of fully, but it can be, there are many works that come from it, like Kriya Kairava Chandrika. These are prayogas, which explain the installation of deities, Pratishta Vidi, Padmatantra Prayoga, and Kriya Kairava Chandrika, Padmatantra Prayoga, Pratishta Vidi, and maybe one other. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. Okay. So it has 9,000 stanzas in 82 chapters. It has 4 sections, all 4: Jnana, Yoga, Kriya, and Charya. Right. With 12, 5, right, 32 and 33 chapters respectively. Obviously, the bulk of Padmasamhita deals with Kriya and Charya. That is 32 and 33, making up 65 of the 82 chapters. And then we have 12 chapters for Jnana, and then only 5 chapters on Yoga. Right, so we have the Jnana section begins with an account of the circumstance which brought the Samhita into being. At the bidding of Brahma, sage Samvarta went to Patala, meaning to the lower planetary systems, and learned the system from Kapila, who gave his version of this Agama in 1.5 crore stanzas. 1.5 crore. A crore means 10 million. So 1.5 crore means 15 million stanzas, right? He returned to Earth. Who is that? This sage called Samvarta, who learned it from Kapila, right? He returned to the middle planetary system at Earth and taught the doctrines to a sage called Kanva. Kanva and others who were interlocutors in this Samhita, right? So the Lord is said to have promulgated the system. He is referred to as Adi Deva. So Adi Deva taught this originally. Among the 2 derivations offered for the name Pancharatra, the word ratra is taken in the sense of luster or light, right? And it is held that the other 5 systems become lusterless by the side of this system. So there are actually six systems of knowledge, 6 systems of knowledge called Sad Darshanas previously in India. So there's yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, and Purva and Uttamimamsa. That's interesting because here Pancharatra is considered one of these systems and to be the best one of the 5, unless these 5 systems mean something else, which we might find out. So it's taken to be luster, and it's held to be that the other 5 systems lose their luster or lose their brightness by the side of this system, which is actually the greatest. The second interpretation of the word ratra, right, as dead or ineffective in the sense that the other systems become worthless by the side of this system. So that's another, these are all different ideas of Pancharatra, what it means. The Pancharatra system is said to be of 4 Siddhantas. And I think we dealt with this before. We have the Agama Siddhanta, we have the Tantra Siddhanta, we have the Mantra Siddhanta, and they have the Tantra Siddhanta. So the number of texts is said to be 108 in the Pancharatra canon. But of course, we probably find more than 108 Samhitas. But anyway, 108 is a nice number, so that's why they say 108. So in the Padma Samhita, it says there are 108, just like in the Muktika Upanishad, it says that there are 108 Upanishads, but actually we might find up to 223, I think, Upanishads. So, but 108, are recognized here by the Padma Samhita. The evolution of vyuhas, divine descents, the nature of Brahman, the process of creation, and the means of getting moksha are dealt with in this section, meaning the Jnana section, which comes first. Salokya, meaning the moksha of being in the same Vaikuntha area or planet, the same Paramapadam, the supreme abode of the Lord, right, is said to be the kind of moksha in which the self becomes one with Brahman. Okay, so Salokya usually means being in the same place. But here he's saying it means to become one with Brahman. Not interesting, like water in a river mingling with the water in the sea. So the river goes into the sea and the fresh water in the river mixes with the salt water of the sea. The tattvas are enumerated to be 51 in number, the tattvas. Okay, so usually in Sankhya, the tattvas are not 51, but anyway, we have to look at Padma Samhita Jnana section to see exactly what that all means. The created world is described as in all its varieties. The purpose of the Lord's holding the conch, discus, lotus, and club are stated thus. So explains here, Stityai Chakram, Sarojsi Sarasijam, Dadanam, Shrishtaye Puna, Muktaye Panchajanyam Cha Gadam Samhritaye Tata. Okay, that's interesting, right? So the second section, so basically what is it saying here? It says the chakra deals with stitya sarasijam, right? The has to do with Shristi, of creation, liberation. Panchajanya has to do with liberation, and the Gada, or the club, has to do with Samriti, Samhara, or destruction. And I'm not sure. Sarasijam probably means the lotus. Dadanam, not sure exactly what it means. We could look it up. Okay. So the second section is on yoga. So after the first 12 chapters, then we have 5 chapters on yoga as a means to get moksha. Karma yoga and jnana yoga are 2 kinds of yoga. The former consists of fixing the mind on doing what is enjoined in the Vedas. The latter is of the nature of fixing the mind on attaining the highest goal. The yogic practices as laid down by Patanjali are discussed in detail with slight alterations to suit the purpose of the Agama. The object of meditation is described to be Vishnu. The third section, so after those 5 chapters on yoga, the third section, Kriyapada, treats the ways and means of constructing the temple and installation of deities or icons therein. The religious leader or preceptor, the head priest or deshika or acharya, is to take charge of the entire proceedings, starting from the selection of sites, which is said to be of 4 kinds. So sites for building the temple, right? Locality for this is of 8 kinds. 49 kinds of temples are enumerated and described. So this is followed by a selection to be made for the making of the mula bearer, or the main fixed deity, the achala deity, right? Which is immovable, which should be of a specific color, talking about the black granite, or what's also called shalagram stone deity. We saw a picture the other day of 2 big shalagram stones that were brought from the Gandaki River in Nepal to be made into the deities of Sita Ram in the new Ayodhya temple. So anyway, this talks about the making of the mula bearer, right, which means the immovable deity, which is made of stone, black stone. So in North India, of course, many deities are made of marble or white stone. But anyway, different colors stone. But in South India, always this black granite type stone. 4 chapters are devoted to the installation of images, right? So there are 4 chapters on Pratishta Vidhi. The section ends with the methods of domestic worship. So not only the temple, but it also deals with house worship. So in the same section, mention is made of the 5 forms of God, Panchamurti, with the form of Vishnu at the head of the 4 Vyuha forms. So we have Vishnu, we have Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha as these Vyuhas. The Supreme Being is referred to as Adi Murti, the original form. The 5 forms, Vasudeva, Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Ananta, are to be installed. All these suggest that the Vaikhanasa tradition must have been the basis for the development of Pancharatra. Right. So 6 idols, or 6 types of deity in the same temple are required to be installed in the temple. A temple with all these 6 is said to be the best kind. With 3 is considered to be the middle kind. So the Uttama kind is with 6 of them. 3 it's the middle kind, and with only 1 is the lowest kind, like that. So he gives some pramanas in Shastra for that. We won't read that. We can read it later. This 4th section, Charyapad, deals with the methods of worshipping God. So Kriya is completely about building the temple, finding the site, finding the stone for the deity, making the main deity, like that, and about the different types of deities that have to be installed in different temples, right? And whether there are 6, 3, or even 1 form of deity in the temple. Then Charya talks about the daily and occasional worship, Nitya Naimittika, puja of the deity. So deals with the methods of worshiping God. Those who follow the Ekayana, remember we talked about the Ekayana when the Veda was all one, in one recension, right? So have the primary qualification for attending to the acts of worship. So people who follow the Ekayana Shaka of the Vedas, the one branch of the Vedas. Others who choose to adopt this method have only a secondary status, right? Initiation or Diksha bestows on those who are not otherwise qualified for any Vedic ritual the required qualification. So let's say that again. According to Padma Samhita, somebody who takes Pancharatrik Diksha, according to Padma Samhita, it bestows upon him the qualification for any Vedic ritual, right? Once he takes that Pancharatrik initiation. So this is very important in later forms of Vaishnavism. The Pancharatrik initiation is performed, and then that person can perform any Vedic ritual like that. So it's mentioned in Ishvara, also in this Samhita, that even Shudras and people who are not normally given Vedic initiation or Upanayinam, they can get this Pancharatrik initiation, and they can become qualified for any Vedic ritual like that. So here it's said by Dr. Vivaradacharya in his book that. So we can also look that up. It's in chapter 4, or the 4th section, let's say. 4th section means Jnana, Yoga, Kriya, and Charya. So in the Charya section, chapter 1, verses 6 to 9, we can look that up. That'll be the proof for that. The 2nd and 3rd chapters give an elaborate description of the procedure to be followed for initiation. So that's also described here. That type of initiation is called the Chakrabja Mandala Diksha. The details contained in chapters 1 to 4 prove that the rites of Pancharatra are not anti-Vedic. Worship that is conducted every day is called Nityotsava, or Nitya Utsava, or the daily or eternal festival. And this is to be done for the welfare of the country as a whole, because when we worship in the temple, we're worshiping for the benefit of the whole community. Varieties of dance poses and musical instruments are to be used, show that worship of God is not simply a Vedic ritual, but is a feast for the ears and for the eyes and ears, giving rise to the immense delight of the participants and spectators. Chapter 6 describes how God is to be worshipped in the house, right? So again, domestic worship is also dealt with, and temple worship is also dealt with. Chapter 6 describes how God is to be worshipped in the house. Attention to God's upachara or service are said to be 128 in number. So sometimes we get different numbers of services which we offer to the deity, from either 1 to 5 to 16 upacharas or services, which is very common. 64. Here it says 128 in number total. Yatrasana, right, or going on a procession, is an additional stage which the other texts do not mention. So other texts of Pancharatra don't mention the procession, but here in Padma Samhita it mentions procession. Several mandalas and the Chakraja mandala in particular are treated in chapter 7. The ceremonial bath or snapana is most difficult. Its most difficult kind is Sahasra Kalashabhishek, with 1,000 pots of liquids to be offered onto the deity or icon. Finds a detailed treatment in chapters 8 and 9, respectively. Chapters 10 and 11 give a detailed account of the conduct of annual festivals. Chapter 13 contains a lucid account of the daily routine divided into 5 kinds. Remember the daily routine, Panchakala Kriya Deepa, right? And Panchakala Kriya, and also we could say, Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Swadhyaya, and Yoga. So that's also described. Expiratory or Prayaschitta rites are described along with the mantras which are to be used. The differences among the 4 Siddhantas, remember what the Siddhantas were? Tantra Siddhanta, Mantra Siddhanta, Agamas Siddhanta, and Mantrantra Siddhanta, I think. Yes, okay, so we discussed that. Also discussed in the beginning of Pancharatra Raksha by Vedanta Deshika. Right, so the difference in the four Siddhantas are described, and the chapter 21, mudras or hand gestures are described as particular arrangement of fingers. The 2 palms should be smeared with sandalwood paste before the mudra is formed. This Samhita, just to clean them ritually, the Samhita enumerates 52 mudras, right, and describes each one of them. Chapter 23 is devoted to the role of mantras in worship. The mantra enables the person who utters it to reflect upon all beings. It saves one who recites it from bondage. right? And there's a pramana for that. So another direction that is given here is that the mantra is to be well guarded as a secret. The affix ra is used here in the masculine gender. So mantra. So the suffix, which comes at the end, mantra. So ra here is talking about ra, not just tra. Sometimes we get mantra, means manaha trayate iti mantraha, right? So what that which helps to deliver the mind is a mantra. But here, ra specifically is mentioned. So ra also, when we hear of ra, we can think of rahasya. Rahasya means secret, right? So here he's talking about the mantras should be secret. The mantras are stated to yield relatively higher results in different yugas. So at different times, the mantras give us different results. This chapter describes also how one can recite the particular mantras and succeed in getting full benefits from them. So that was in the chapter, let's see what chapter that was, chapter 23, about mantras in Padma Samhita. The Dwarasakshara, Astakshara, Vishnu Gayatri are the mantras of the Vibhavas. So the Vibhavas that are the emanations from the Vyuha, which is the emanations from the para form, right? The Dwarasakshara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Astakshara Om Namo Narayana, and Vishnu Gayatri Narayana Vidmahe Vasudevaya Dhimhi Tanno Vishnu Prachodayat, right? Are the mantras for the Vishnu Vibhavas. Those of the other forms of Vishnu, like Yagyavaraha, Shri, Lakshmi, and others are elaborately treated in chapters 24 to 33. The Sudarshana mantra takes up the whole of chapter 32. Not only the mantras of those deities who form the retinue of Vishnu, right, get a significant place, but also the 7 Yakshinis, Sundari, Manohara, Kameshwari, Padmini, Yamini, Maituna Priya, and Rati Priya are dealt with. The mantras of Pishachas, right, who are types of demons, are then described. Padma, Sanat Kumara, Parama, Padmodbhava, Mahendra, and Kanva Tantra are said to be the best texts. So it's mentioned in Padma. This Samhita is based on the Jayakya. So remember, the Jayakya was the main text used in Kanchipuram, in the temple of Devaraj Perumal in Kanchipuram, Vishnu Kanchi, like that. And so this is a commentary, considered like a commentary on the Jayaka Samhita, is intended for the use in the temple of Kanchi. Yet it has become more popular than other texts by reason of giving complete information on all aspects of the Agama. Let me repeat that. Padma Samhita has become more popular than other Pancharatra texts by reason of giving complete information on all aspects of the Agama, whereas some of these others that we discussed give partial information on certain aspects. Right, so this is therefore adopted as a standard text wherever the Pancharatra mode prevails. So this Padma Samhita is a very, very standard text. Now, that's finished with Padma. We're going to talk about Purushottama Samhita. The Purushottama Samhita has 1,000 stanzas in 34 chapters. The Kriya and Charya aspects of the Agama are dealt with here. The Naradiya Samhita has a little over 3,500 stanzas and 30 chapters. Bhrigu teaches the doctrine Suatri Vasudeva is stated to have sprung from Vishnu. He is Paramahamsa, right? Sankarshana is Vyoman. Pradyumna is Nada. Remember, we talked this aspect of sound. Aniruddha is Hamsa. Hamsa means a swan. Paramahamsa means a supreme swan. Vyoma is also, might have something to do with the sound also. Vasudeva is also stated to be Purusha, Sankarshana is Satya, Pradyumna is Achyuta, and Narayana is Aniruddha. So we're taking the Vyuhas from the Vaikanasic system and the Pancharasic system and equating them in this Purushottama Samhita. It is not clear whether this depiction of Vyuha represents an attempt at reconciling the Pancharatra and Vaikanasa concepts of Godhead. Another interesting feature is the spirit of tolerance noticed in chapters 5 and 11, which contain an exposition of the system of Shaivism, right? Interesting. So here in this Purushottama Samhita, we've got something trying to make an outreach to the people who follow the Shaiva Agamas. Worship of Shiva is said to bring certain benefits. Different kinds of offerings to God are recommended. The Markandeya Samhita These are all minor Samhitas, which we're talking about now, which has about 2,500 stanzas in 32 chapters, discusses the Charya and Kriya aspects, right? So no Jnana and Yoga. Markandeya discourses on these to King Prithu. So we know about King Prithu from the Bhagavatam and maybe some other Puranas. In 8 chapters of 3,500 slokas, the Vishnu Tilaka Samhita, which is also in print, but maybe not in English like that, discusses yoga, mantras, and festivals. The information on these topics is highly useful for supplementing the study of other works. Each chapter has a very large number of stanzas. Brahma discourses on these topics to the sages, the Vishwamitra Samhita, and I have most of these Samhitas, and if not, they're found on archive.org. You can find them. If anybody needs a link to download any of these Samhitas, just send me a text or an email. Containing about 2,700 stanzas in 27 chapters, dealing with the Charya and Kriya aspects. So you can see a lot of these Samhitas, they just deal with the Charya and Kriya aspects, right? Is in the form of a discourse between Vishwamitra, right, who was a great sage, the sage of the Gayatri Mantra, delivered to Kasyapa, another sage, who became dissatisfied with the systems of Mimamsa and Vedanta. So Mimamsa and Vedanta are, again, part of those 6 Saddarshanas, the 6 main systems. Vishwamitra had received the doctrine from Brahma, meaning the doctrine of Pancharatra. The following stanzas explain the word bhaga, means when is applied to Bhagavan. So Bhaga talks about the Sadgunyas, the 6 qualities of Bhagavan, or of the Supreme Lord. Cosmology and the Dwadasakshara mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, are dealt with in the chapters 4, 5, and maybe, I'm going to say V there, probably 5, whatever it is. I'm not sure what that last thing is. The Sri Prashna Samhita has about 5,500 stanzas in 54 chapters. Narayana expounds the doctrines in answer to questions put by Shri or Lakshmi, and hence the title. So what's the title? Sri Prashna. So Prashna means questions. Sri Prashna means questions by Lakshmi to Narayana. So here are the answers by Narayana. There are certain passages here which are identical with those in the Sattvada and Ishvara Samhitas. So it must have come later because it's borrowed from them, perhaps borrowed from them. It is mostly devoted to the Charya and Kriya aspects, once again, and gives useful information and to conduct festivals in the temple. Separate chapters are devoted to the treatment of yoga, Panchakala Prakriya, which we talked about, the 5 different aspects of the day, the daily routine of the Vaishnava, Prapati or surrender or Sharanagati, and the rules of expiation or Prayaschitta, right, to atone for sinful activities or mistakes in the worship. So Sankarsana descended from as Narasimha. So from Sankarsana comes Narasimha. Through a portion of his power, and Pradyumna became Rama. So God tells Lakshmi that till this time, the account he gave this account, neither the enlightened ones, the Gyanis or the Yogis, nor others were aware of the great form. I'm not sure what that is. The something form. Yeah. Anyway, this form, right? And there's the quotation from the Sri Prashna Samhita, chapter 4, 5b, 6a. Right. So this passage is evidence to show archa form. It says here, archa form, the deity form. So this passage is evidence to show that the archa form of God is not very ancient in its origin. Yogic practice is stated to be the means for attaining moksha. So this also sometimes people say that Ramanuja told everybody to perform dhyana or meditation, and that bhakti was described as being meditation, like the uninterrupted meditation, like the flow of oil from one vessel to another. So that was the original idea. So this Samhita is followed in the Sri Sharangapani Swami temple in Kumbakonam, which is a very important temple in Kumbakonam, which is just near Sri Rangam, and has several expressions which are of Tamil origin. So we get some Tamil expressions mixed in with this in the Samhita, the Sri Prashna Samhita. Many festivals which are held in the temples of South India, Tamil Nadu in particular, are mentioned. Several dance poses, musical melodies, and instruments are also referred to. There are other Samhitas, most of them dealing generally with Charya and Kriya. They treat of the construction of temples, conduct of festivals, and expiatory or prayaschitta rites. Yogic practices and linguistic occultism do not get much attention in some of these works. In the treatment of the subjects between one text and another, there's not much difference. Much importance cannot be attached to the enumeration of the names of the Samhitas in some of the texts. For example, in the Padma, Markandeya, and Hayashirsha Samhitas and the Vishnu Tantra, their own names head the lists. On the other hand, the Kapinjala, Parameshwara, Bharadvaja, and Vishwamitra Samhitas and the Mahendra Tantra mention the name of a Samhita other than their own at the head of their lists. Right? Firstly, there is no evidence to show that the order in which the texts are enumerated as the same in which they were composed. If the order was meant to declare the precedence of one over another, then all the lists should reveal uniformly their enumeration. Secondly, there is no evidence also to show that this enumeration of the text was not interpolated subsequent to the composition of the works in which they get mentioned. Thirdly, such lists as those given in the Padma, Markandeya, and other Samhitas commence with their own names as heading the lists, perhaps to lay emphasis on themselves as more important than those whose names are enumerated there later. Lastly, reliance must be placed on other pieces of evidence, such as the references made in one text or others, like the Aryabuddha Samhita and Lakshmi Tantra, referring to the Sattva and Jayakya, right? Telling us which was first and which was later. So significance must also be attached to the mention of some text as great, right? So some texts will mention other texts as being great or their own text as being great. Until more information is available regarding the contents of the Samhitas now preserved only in manuscripts, right? So here he's talking mainly about the ones which are printed. And we can also look at H. Daniel Smith's very short understanding, a description of the printed text of the Pancharatra Agama, which is available for free download on archive.org. Send me an email or a text, I'll send you the link. But there are many Samhitas which are still only in manuscript and haven't been printed. So until more information is available regarding the contents of the Samhitas now preserved only in manuscripts, it will not be practicable to have an estimate of their contribution. Besides the texts that have been mentioned here are the most important ones which the leading exponents of Vaishnavism have chosen to cite in support of various topics. So that is bringing us up to the next chapter, which we'll cover next time, Agamas and Vaishnava literature. But that is like a bit of an overview of all the different Pancharatra Samhitas and their contents. And for more of that, we can go and look at this descriptive bibliography of H. Daniel Smith of the printed text of the Pancharatra Agama, which gives us more details. And if we want more details than that, we have to look at the Samhitas themselves, which are available, and we can translate certain sections. He's given some very important pramanas or quotations that prove certain different things according to Pancharatra. And he's also made some assumptions there in that chapter about which ones came first, which ones are more important. And he's also mentioned that, again, that Padma has become very practical and very popular amongst all the priests in all the Pancharatric temples.
Om Namo Narayana.